In this pod slice summary of the Jordan Peterson podcast, Dr. Jordan Peterson and cognitive neuroscientist Dr. Donald Hoffman delve into the realm of evolution, reality, perception, and consciousness. They consider a radical yet data-driven theory. Our perceptions do not reflect reality, but are more aligned with evolutionary survival tactics. Dr. Hoffman proposes that we've mistaken our perceptual realities, analogous to a headset, for absolute truths. He illustrates this using evolutionary game theory, proposing that evolution shapes our sensory systems primarily to guide adaptive behavior, ensuring survival and reproduction, not to see reality as it is. Hoffman's studies led him to the surprising conclusion that the chance that we see reality as it truly is, based on Darwinian principles, is essentially zero. This is due to the fitness payoffs in evolutionary theory, which affect the structure of organisms and guide the evolution of our sensory systems. Hoffman explains that fitness payoffs are functions of the world, depending on the state of the world, the organism, its state, and its actions. These payoffs guide evolution, but Hoffman and his team found that a very small fraction of these payoff functions preserve any structure of the world that the organisms might perceive. Therefore, our perceptions do not reflect truth or reality, as they've evolved not to represent the truth, but to keep us alive. Peterson extends this discussion to the complexity of perception, outlining the various layers of constraints, agreements, and understandings that underlie our perception of facts. He cites the example of building a bridge as a task that presupposes hundreds of implicit assumptions and constraints. Peterson also explores the constraints and conflicts that arise from our Darwinian motivational systems, noting that perception must satisfy each system to deem the action successful. Although the debate centers around evolutionary and perceptual theories, it also raises broader questions regarding our understanding of consciousness and how we navigate within our perceived reality. Dr. Hoffman's theory challenges the widely held belief that we perceive the world as it truly is, suggesting instead that reality extends beyond what our evolutionary headset permits us to see. Navigating further into the complexities of perception, reality, and evolution, Dr. Hoffman and Dr. Peterson delve into fascinating metaphors such as the virtual reality headset or the desktop on a computer. These, Dr. Hoffman argues, are akin to how evolution has shaped our sensory systems, not to accurately perceive reality, but to interact and adapt within it in the most efficient and survivable way. Dr. Hoffman gives an insightful twist on perception by presenting the metaphor of a computer desktop, where one does not need to tackle the complex reality of voltages, but uses designed user interfaces to function effectively. He likens this to how evolution has developed our perception of space, time, and physical objects, not for accurate representation, but for facility of interaction. Dr. Peterson brings a layer of complexity to the interaction of perception and reality by unpacking the notion of motivational or pragmatic ends. Drawing connections to the field of epistemology and ontology, he brings to light that accepting a fact comes with conditions and is nested within a motivational system. In this light, he considers how motivated facts wreak havoc on the concept of objective materialism, questioning the constraints of reality in direct relation to our perceptions. Discussing the perception of objects in the world, both scholars continue their dialogue on whether there's a correspondence or homomorphic relationship between these objects and the underlying reality. Offering alternative perspectives, Dr. Peterson introduces the argument of a low-resolution functional tool that reflects observers' bounded and finite perception of an infinitely complex reality. He builds these ideas by referencing representation and emptying in Catholic thought, suggesting a potential correspondence or bias in our perception, albeit warped by pragmatic motivations. Dr. Hoffman counters this by diving back into the metaphor of a virtual reality game like Grand Theft Auto. He points out the lack of direct homomorphism between the red Ferrari in the VR headset, our perception, and the voltage patterns in the supercomputer, the underlying reality. He solves the paradox by suggesting that while there might be a causal connection, the mapping is not a precise reflection, but more a sequence of structured, causally related events. The beauty of this conversation lies in the intricate dance of hypotheses and counter-arguments that underline the exploration of perception and reality. From evolutionary game theory, Darwinian principles, computational metaphors, to subjective pragmatism, These intellectuals push the boundaries of thought and question the very basis of our vision of the world. Building on what was mentioned previously, the conversation takes a deeper intellectual dive into perception, evolution, and usability. The interesting metaphor of a baby learning to grab a ball is brought into discussion by Dr. Peterson. He likens this gradual cognitive process to that of the immune system learning to stick to the foreign body. These metaphors are central to the thesis of his perspective. We are constantly trying to gain a grip on the world around us. The emphasis, however, is not on achieving a precise structural understanding, but a functional one that aids us in performing the operations we need to. Explaining the concept of conscious agents, Dr. Hoffman breaks down the mathematical model of consciousness. He encapsulates it as a probability space, a realm of potentiality. Bringing the discussion to a practical example, he discusses a simple coin toss experiment to highlight potential outcomes in the probability space. Echoing Dr. Peterson's argument, Dr. Hoffman points out the significance of gaining a grip on this potentiality to navigate and interact effectively with the world around us. Pulling from mythological archetypes, Dr. Peterson analyzes the notions of potentiality, order, and the transformative role consciousness plays within these dichotomies. Drawing parallels to his consciousness as a transformer concept, he dives into myths that represent the structure of reality, underlining the recurring theme of human effort to manifest potential into structured order, a process similar to gaining a grip on reality. The conversation iterates the dynamic exchange of ideologies, pitting the computational against the mythological, the objective versus the subjective, and questioning if indeed consciousness is the ultimate fabric of our reality. Consequently, both scholars prod at our understanding of objective reality, skewing towards the philosophical consensus that consciousness might be more fundamental than our conventional understanding of objective reality. No words are minced as they dive headfirst into the semantic and conceptual exploration of consciousness as a fundamental element of reality. The idea that the objective world is merely a headset, a non-homologous symbol we use to interpret and interact with reality, forces us to question our contemporary understanding of consciousness and the role it plays in shaping our perception. As the intellectual joust continues, Dr. Hoffman introduces the operational scope within the realm of consciousness, comparing it to the probability spectrum a person may experience, coining it as the probability space for consciousness. Dr. Hoffman emphasizes a key concept, that our consciousness operates within a sphere that encapsulates all plausible conscious experiences one could have. He suggests that simpler organisms may have a reduced sphere, with their probability space narrowing down due to their inability to experience complex phenomena like humans can. Moving on, Dr. Peterson throws light on the concept of entropy, cylindricalizing it within a receptive sphere of consciousness. He states that you cannot measure the level of entropic state unless it is related to the ordered state that you are trying to bring about. If you're trying to get a grip on the world to bring about a certain reality, every step towards that reduction in potential pathways to that end produces a positive emotional response. However, an unexpected event that disrupts this steady march, such as a car breakdown, induces a spike in entropy. This deviation from expected order can potentially set off an emotional roller coaster, flooding one with anxiety and stress. In his bid to unravel the mysteries of how consciousness works, Dr. Peterson highlights the unconscious tendency of our minds to see an object not for its materialistic representation, but for its significance in a given potentiality space. Our brain converts the potentiality space into probable outcomes, allowing us to navigate effectively with the world around us. This discussion then leads to a broader philosophical debate on the nature of reality itself. Dr. Peterson raises the question of what constitutes objective reality, questioning the underlying assumption of objective materialism. Dr. Hoffman presents a counter-argument that consciousness is the fundamental reality, noting that our experience of space and time is merely a projection of a much deeper reality. He argues that space-time, the very foundation of materialistic ideas, falls apart beyond the restrictive confines of the Planck scale. Therefore, the avant-garde scientists are now trying to look for structures entirely outside of space-time, not constrained within it. Thus, as Dr. Peterson and Dr. Hoffman navigate the complex interfaces between consciousness, reality, and perception. They bring to light fascinating insights into how our understanding of the world around us may be just a facet of a far more intricate multidimensional existence. Dr. Peterson and Dr. Hoffman dip deeper into the waters of human perception and scientific theories, scrutinizing the axiomatic underpinnings of the scientific process. Peterson poses the question of how scientific theories are predicated, highlighting the acceptance of certain unprovable axioms as stepping stones for each scientific discovery. This, he elaborates, creates a gateway for potential observable phenomena within the restrictions of these axioms. Exploring this further, Dr. Peterson illuminates the correlation between these axioms and miracles, occurrences that are not governed by the rules that apply within that system. These axioms, in essence, encapsulate such miracles, hiding them within their unchallenged acceptance and leaving only the calculable and observable to be tackled in scientific query. Dr. Hoffman agrees, discussing the precision with which scientists set their assumptions. These assumptions determine the scope of what can be proposed and also signal its limits. For instance, he says, with SpaceTime, the limits are set at 10 to the minus 33 centimeters. Beyond this, SpaceTime falls apart, indicating a calling for a broader framework with deeper assumptions. However, such assumptions, Dr. Hoffman notes, will always exist, thus implying the impossibility of a comprehensive theory of everything. The dialogue takes a philosophical shift as Dr. Peterson reflects on a story of Abraham from an evolutionary perspective. Unraveling the narrative, he proposes the idea that the storyline attempts to map a pathway that maximizes reproductive fitness across iterative generations, challenging the traditional close-knit concept of reproduction tethered to short-term sex. He posits that we require an ethos to guarantee reproductive fitness across time, thus broadening the perception of reproduction from a singular biological function to a multi-generational ethical and behavioral pattern. Responding to Dr. Peterson's thesis, Dr. Hoffman acknowledges that while sex is indeed one pathway, it is not the fundamental one. There are diverse strategies that organisms deploy to ensure the spread of their genes within a population. However, he also suggests a provocative perspective. Evolution, in his eyes, is an artifact of space and time projection, a mere instrument of a deeper reality. Recognizing consciousness as primary, he stipulates that the conceptualization of consciousness operating within the world using these projections is a means of perception familiar to humans. Dr. Hoffman provocatively proposes that consciousness may be a primary fundamental and projects space and time to facilitate survival and reproduction. A reality, he suggests, which transcends human survival and reproduction, sparks the question of whether our realities are tethered solely to our biological needs, or if they hint at a more profound truth. This notion spirals off into a philosophical expedition where Dr. Hoffman proposes that there's one infinite consciousness seeking to understand itself from multiple perspectives. In the quest for understanding themselves, Dr. Peterson draws a parallel to the multiple depictions of the divine in biblical narratives. The limitation of the unlimited, according to traditional doctrines, lies within humans themselves. This, he proposes, ties in with the endeavor of scientific exploration. Dr. Hoffman throws light on the pushback he's received from certain philosophers, insisting that the limitations of scientific theories are determined by their assumptions. He argues that these theories only go so far in unveiling the underlying reality, and beyond those limits opens up more profound truths. This perspective aligns with the fundamental claims of the pragmatists, accepting that truth is an ever-receding, continually bounded goal. Dr. Hoffman's fascination with evolutionary game theory is based on it being the best mathematical tool within the field of evolutionary theory. He emphasizes, though, that these theories and tools are not the final word or absolute truth, but represent only our understanding's current state. Dr. Peterson and Dr. Hoffman explore the interplay of philosophy, theology, evolutionary biology, and game theory, framing these into discussions about the nature of consciousness, its projection within space and time, and our pursuit for knowledge. In the mathematical model of consciousness outside of space-time, Dr. Hoffman aims to project into its domain and provide clear predictions. The momentum distributions of quarks and gluons within a proton, for instance. Despite the complexity of the brain and its neural correlates with consciousness, Dr. Hoffman finds it more accessible to start with a simplistic part of the science. He reinforces that his goal is not just theorizing consciousness, but predicting its structure to prevent the theory from being dismissed out of hand. From this, he plans to progress to molecules and neural systems to understand the neural correlates of consciousness. Key to this understanding is the idea that the brain does not cause consciousness. Instead, Dr. Hoffman proposes that the brain is a symbol within the headset. He goes on to argue that neurons, although not directly perceived, do not cause our behavior, suggesting a more complicated picture that demands further study and funding. When queried about the existential implications of his ideas, Dr. Hoffman discusses the shift in his self-image. He used to see himself as a physical object in space-time, where the death of the body signified the demise of the self. However, advancing scientific perspectives have led him to see his body as simply an avatar, a symbolic representation in a headset, and death as akin to removing the headset. His emotions, however, persist in their attachment to physicalism and materialism. From a spiritual perspective, Dr. Hoffman leans into his Christian upbringing and Eastern thought, expressing a belief that each of us is a single consciousness experiencing itself through different avatars. This philosophical shift also reframes his approach to morality as prevailing within the rules of the headset. However, once the headset is removed, Dr. Hoffman speculates, any moral imperatives incumbent within this reality may become irrelevant. As the podcast approaches conclusion, Dr. Peterson suggests that a future conversation might delve into the metaphysics of ethics, an aspect left untouched in their current exchange. They both express gratitude towards each other, their team, and the audience before closing the episode. Check out the full podcast by clicking the link in the description below. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for listening to this podcast summary episode of The Pod Slice.